It started with a slap. Not a scream, not a warning, just the sharp crack of palm against skin, so sudden that Nadia's knees buckled and she fell to the dusty porch like a child dropped from heaven. Auntie Sandra stood over her, slipper raised again like a judge passing sentence. "You disgrace," she spat. "After killing your parents, you now marry a homeless fool without our consent." Jerry tried to shield Nadia with his arms, trembling, his shirt smeared with dust. Beside them, 2 battered travel bags lay open, their contents spilled across the cement. Worn clothes, a torn Bible, a cracked photo frame with 2 smiling faces frozen in a beachside memory. Her parents, Margaret and Emeka, the last time they were all together. Nadia couldn't even lift her head. Her face stung. Her heart throbbed with a pain deeper than shame. From the gate, Uncle Nambi's voice sliced through the air. "You will not stay in this house. Not with that useless man. This is a family home, not a charity for street rats." His hands clutched a thick padlock like it was justice. Another uncle, silent, tall, and equally cold, grabbed their bags and flung them through the gate. They hit the pavement with a thud, clothes tumbling onto the road like a thrown-out life. A baby down the street began to cry. Curtains shifted. Neighbors stared. No one stepped in. "I'm not even sure you're our brother's daughter," Namdi added coldly. "Go live with your gateman somewhere else, far away from here, far from our shame." Nadia bit her lip hard, but her tears still came. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. Jerry held her hand. The gate slammed shut behind them. The padlock clicked, loud and final. They were locked out, exiled, cast into the street with dust on their backs and nowhere to go. "I'm sorry," Nadia whispered. Her voice shook like her hands. Jerry touched her cheek where the slap still burned. "Don't apologize," he said. "You did nothing wrong." She looked up at him, hollow-eyed. "But we have nothing." He didn't flinch. "We have each other." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the simple court wedding they had yesterday meant something. That the vows, whispered under a fading sky with palm oil-shined shoes and second-hand rings, were real. That the way he looked at her, steady, kind, true, could be enough. But now, sitting on the side of the road, bruised and broken, she felt like her life had crumbled with the slam of that gate. "I thought this house would be ours," she said quietly. "I thought I could keep it. For them." She meant her parents. After the accident, a rainy night, a speeding bus, a phone call that shattered the world, the uncles had swooped in like vultures. Talk of selling the house, splitting the property. "It's for the family," they'd said. "It's what your father would want." Nadia had said no. Firmly, quietly. This was not just a building. It was memory. It was mango trees and math homework. It was her mother's singing in the corridor. Her father's scent on the armchair. They didn't listen. Then came Jerry. Quiet, respectful, with soft eyes and a bag of bread for the neighborhood children. A security guard at a biscuit company, he said, but a graduate too, looking for better work. His shirt was always clean, even if old. He laughed at her bad jokes. He listened to her talk about apps for children without teachers. He didn't promise wealth. He promised support. "I don't have much yet," he'd said once, "but I have plans. And I have you." She married him with hope. That was yesterday. Now, they sat on the pavement with nothing but faith and dust. Then Jerry reached into one of the old bags and pulled out a phone. Not the kind you find in second-hand stalls or budget kiosks. This was sleek, new, expensive, a phone with weight and presence. Nadia's breath caught. "Jerry, where did you get that?" He didn't look at her. Not right away. He unlocked the screen with a calm swipe and held it to his ear. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. Then, into the phone, his voice firm. "David, bring the cars. Emma's house. Now." Nadia stared at him. "What cars?" "Jerry, who is David?" He put the phone away and looked at her with the same gentle eyes. But there was something beneath them now. Something quiet and powerful. "The world you see is not the whole world," he said. "Please, trust me, just for a few more minutes." Then they heard it. A low hum. Engines. Deep, smooth, expensive. 3 black SUVs turned the corner like shadows made of metal and glass. They glided down the street, windows dark, drivers in suits. The kind of cars no one dared block. They stopped in front of the gate. One door opened. A man in black stepped out, bowed slightly, and said, "Sir, we came as fast as we could." The neighbors gasped. Curtains pulled back. Annie Sandra's slipper dropped from her hand behind the fence. Jerry took Nadia's hand. "There's a part of my life I hid," he said. "I wanted to find something real." He guided her gently toward the first SUV. Its door opened as if by magic. Nadia hesitated. Was this real? Was this a prank? A dream? Just hours ago, they were being beaten like dogs. Now this? "Trust me," Jerry whispered. "Let me show you." Inside, the leather seats embraced her like nothing she'd ever felt. The air smelled like newness. Like power. Jerry sat beside her, steady as always. "You said you were a gateman," she whispered. "I was. I live like one. But that's not all I am." He turned to her. "I'm the CEO of Gentech." Nadia's breath caught. Her lips parted. Gentech. Every child in Nigeria had touched something Gentech built. Learning platforms, mobile banking apps, digital school tools. Gentech was everywhere. It was wealth. It was legend. "You're lying," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "I hid it. Because money blinds people. I wanted to meet someone who saw the man, not the billionaire." Her mind spun. She remembered how he listened under the mango tree, how he helped sweep the compound, how he promised her school, even when he had nothing. He had everything, and still he'd hidden it. "And you chose me?" she asked, voice breaking. He smiled faintly. "You chose me first." The SUV turned off the road. The street sign read, "Banana Island." Nadia's heart thundered. Tall gates, crystal fountains, polished streets. A mansion that looked like a museum of light and glass stood waiting. Guards saluted. Doors opened. Jerry reached for her hand again. "Welcome home." Her knees nearly gave. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's real," he said, "and it's yours." But before she could answer, a knock echoed through the golden door. Hard, demanding. Then a voice cracked with rage. "Nadia, open this door." She froze. Uncle Namdi. He had followed them, and he was not alone. The knock came again. Louder this time. More violent. It wasn't a knock. It was a threat. "Nadia, open this door right now." Uncle Namdi's voice tore through the silence like a blade. Nadia froze halfway up the staircase, her hand resting on the polished banister. The grand chandelier above sparkled like ice, but all she felt was heat, the rising panic crawling up her spine. Another voice now, higher, shriller, and laced with fury. "Shameless girl." Annie Sandra howled. "You disgraced this family, and now you hide like a thief? Come out before we drag you out." Nadia's breath caught. Just hours ago, she had been kneeling in the dust with a swollen cheek and nowhere to go. And now they had followed her. Here, into the belly of power. The fortress she had just begun to believe could keep her safe. The guards at the golden doors turned to Jerry. Their eyes awaited instruction. He didn't blink. "Do not open," he said quietly. "Let them knock until their fists bleed." Nadia turned to him. Her voice was small. "Jerry, they followed us. They saw the cars. They must have. What if they try to hurt you? What if they bring people? What if—" He placed a firm, gentle hand on her shoulder. It anchored her like an oath. "They cannot touch you here," he said. "This is my home. These are my guards. And you, Nadia, you are safe." But outside, the banging only grew louder. Slipper strikes against gold. Fists, feet, screaming. Gossip was now a crowd, a mob of curious neighbors forming just outside the gates. One of the guards pressed a button beside the staircase. A wide screen on the far wall blinked to life, showing a full-color security feed. There they were. Uncle Namdi, sweating, eyes wild, fists red from pounding the door. Annie Sandra, barefoot, wrapper tied high, her mouth moving like a storm. Behind them, neighbors gathered like moths to flame. Phones out, some filming, others whispering. Nadia covered her face. Her hands shook. "Oh God," she murmured. "I can't face them. Not again. Not like this." Jerry didn't respond. He walked to the console and pressed another button. With a low mechanical hiss, the mansion's enormous doors began to swing open. Gasps echoed from outside. Auntie Sandra stumbled backward, adjusting her wrapper. Uncle Nambi stepped forward, puffing his chest. Then Jerry stepped into the doorway. He didn't wear a designer suit. No gold rings. No show of wealth. Just the same simple shirt and trousers Nadia had always known. And yet, on that marble step, framed by glass and light, he looked nothing like a gateman. He looked like power. Namdi blinked. "You," he said, squinting. The gateman? "She is here," Jerry replied calmly. "And she is safe." Annie Sandra pushed forward. "Safe with you?" A poor rat pretending to be a man. She raised her slipper. "Bring her out now. She belongs to us. We are her family. We decide her fate, not you." Two guards stepped between them and Jerry, rifles gleaming beneath the sun. Calm, steady, like shadows made of iron. The crowd murmured louder. Phones rose higher. A child gasped. Somewhere, a spoon clattered on cement, and no one picked it up. Jerry didn't move. His voice dropped an octave. Cold, precise. "This is my home. My wife is inside. And you," he pointed directly at them, "will never lay a finger on her again." Behind a staircase, Nadia trembled. But something shifted inside her. A slow, rising burn. Not fear, something stronger. She stepped out into the open, her eyes red but steady. Her voice came, low at first, but clear. "I married a man who loves me," she said. "Not for money, not for name, but love." The crowd silenced. "And I will not leave him." Uncle Namby's mouth twisted. "Ungrateful orphan," he spat. "We clothed you. We fed you. You beat me," she snapped. Her voice rose, ringing off the chandelier. "You starved me. You called me trash because I married who I loved. And now you want me back? To control me again?" The crowd stirred. Some nodded. Others whispered. Jerry stepped forward. "You heard her," he said. "Leave now, or I promise you will never be allowed near her again." Before Namby could speak, headlights sliced across the driveway. A silver Mercedes glided to a stop. All heads turned. A tall man stepped out, regal in Igbata, his cap flawless, face familiar. Even Nadia recognized him from the news. Chief Adewale, one of the wealthiest men in Lagos. Philanthropist, billionaire industrialist, longtime business ally of Gentech. He strolled forward, shaking Jerry's hand. "Jerry, you returned early," he said with a warm smile. "I had to stop by." He turned to Nadia. "And this must be your wife." "Ah, beautiful." Another ripple of gasps. Annie Sandra's slipper slipped from her grip. Adewale frowned and turned to the gate crowd. "And these people, shouting at your door like fishmongers." "Relatives," Jerry replied, "but soon to be strangers." The chief chuckled. "Good man. Cut the weeds, or they'll choke your garden." Annie Sandra's eyes burned, but her feet were still. Namby's bravado cracked. His voice had vanished. But just as the neighbors began to retreat, Nadia saw it. A look, a whisper. Sandra leaned to Namdi, lips curled. "This is not over. That girl will pay." Nadia shivered. That night, the mansion glowed with quiet gold, but her mind could not rest. Jerry slept peacefully beside her, one arm over her waist, trusting the guards, the walls, the world he had built. But Nadia knew better. Her family didn't retreat. They plotted, and somewhere across the city, in a dark room lit by kerosene flame, Sandra and Namdi sat whispering over bitter tea. "You saw it," Sandra said. "That boy is someone powerful. And now the whole street laughs at us." Namdi rubbed his forehead. "We try to shame them, but we lifted them instead." "Then we destroy them again," Sandra said coldly. "Not with fists, with lies." "Ow!" She leaned in. "We tell the world he tricked her, brainwashed her, that he was after her inheritance. We cry, we scream. The press will eat it up." Nambi hesitated. "But the truth." "They don't want truth," Sandra said. "They want drama." Back in Banana Island, Nadia stood at the tall bedroom window, watching shadows move across the courtyard. "God," she whispered. "Please, not again." Just then a soft knock. She opened the door cautiously. A maid stood, eyes lowered. "Madam, forgive me, but you should see this." Downstairs, the television was already on. Breaking news blared in red letters. On screen, Annie Sandra, face tear-streaked, voice shaking, surrounded by microphones. "My late brother's daughter," she sobbed, "has been taken. trapped in a mansion by a man who tricked her. He was pretending to be poor, but now he has locked her away. We fear for her safety. Please help us bring her back." Nadia gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, no, this is a lie." The maid glanced at her nervously. "Madam, it's already everywhere." By sunrise, the mansion was buzzing with unease. Guards spoke in low tones. Staff avoided eye contact. Phones blinked with messages. Online, the headlines were worse. Orphan bride held hostage by tech mogul. Family claims billionaire CEO used deception. Aunt reveals shocking truth about her niece's marriage. Nadia sat at the dining table, phone in hand, hands trembling. The comments section was hell. Gold digger. Witch. Manipulator. Poor man's curse disguised in rich man's clothes. She felt her stomach twist. Her heart collapse. Jerry walked in. Calm. Sharp. His blue suit flawless. But when he saw her face, his gaze softened. "They're destroying us," she whispered. "People believe them. They're calling you a fraud. They're saying I married you for money. What if this ruins you?" He walked to her, sat beside her, took her hands. His voice was steady. "Let them talk. A lie may run fast." He paused, brushing a tear from her cheek. "But truth walks, and it always arrives." That evening, Jerry opened a drawer in his study. Inside was a thick black folder. I kept records. Everything. From the day I started pretending. Every message. Every day I worked as a gateman. The interviews. The logs. The surveillance. I built a life in shadow, but I did it with proof. By mid-morning, the press conference was set. Reporters crowded the mansion gates like bees drawn to scandal. Cameras clicked. Boom mics hovered. Twitter hashtags trended before breakfast. On the screen, Jerry's name glowed beneath headlines that danced with venom. CEO orphan. Gentech founder accused of grooming orphan bride. Family demands justice. Nadia stood in front of the tall mirror in their room. Her palms were clammy. Her face pale. The white blouse she wore felt stiff. Too clean, like it didn't belong to her. She turned to Jerry. "Are you sure about this?" He adjusted his cufflinks. His voice, calm as always. "This isn't just about truth anymore. It's about who controls the story." Downstairs, a stage had been built in the main foyer. Not dramatic, just enough space for microphones, a podium, and 2 chairs. They stood together, united, fractured, but still holding on. When the doors opened, the press surged inside like a wave. Camera flashes, bark questions, reporters shouting over each other. Jerry raised a hand. The room quieted instantly. His presence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He spoke with a calm that silenced noise. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You've heard many things. Now, you'll hear the truth. Not from anonymous sources, not from angry relatives, but from a man they call a fraud." Gasps, scribbles, camera shutters. Nadia's breath held tight in her chest. She scanned the crowd. Then she saw them. Auntie Sandra and Uncle Namdi, not outside, not behind gates, but inside the hall, pushing through reporters with something in hand. A worn brown envelope. Nadia's stomach dropped. "Stop this charade," Sandra screamed, raising the envelope like it was holy scripture. "We have proof." Reporters turned. Mike swung toward her. Jerry's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. "This," Sandra shouted, waving the envelope, "contains evidence that this girl, this orphan, stole from her family. She married this man to keep the inheritance for herself. She betrayed her blood. She is cursed." The words hit like darts. Gasps rose. Cameras zoomed in. The room trembled. Nadia's knees weakened. What proof? She'd never seen any document, never hidden anything, never even touched her parents' will. Her world spun. Jerry stepped forward. "Come." "May I?" he asked coolly, taking the envelope from Sandra's hand. She hesitated, but the cameras were watching. With a sneer, she handed it over. Jerry opened it. Inside, a few crumpled documents. A photocopy of a will. A bank printout. Legal-looking pages, but the ink was slightly faded, like something reheated in a microwave of lies. Jerry glanced through them. His expression didn't change. Then he raised one page. "This will," he said slowly, "is dated 2 years after Nadia's father died. The room gasped. Sandra's mouth fell open. Jerry flipped to another page. And this bank document. He held it up. It carries a logo that hasn't been used in 5 years. The bank updated their emblem in 2020. These were printed from an old template. A very bad forgery. A long pause. Then laughter. Soft at first. Nervous. Then louder. Reporters turned to Sandra. Mics were in her face. Did you forge these? Where did you get the documents? Have you been stealing Nadia's inheritance? Uncle Namdi's face crumpled. Sweat poured from his temple. You lie, Sandra shrieked, but her voice cracked under the pressure. No, Jerry said, his voice now like steel. You lied. You beat her. You starved her. You threw her into the street. You called her a curse. And still, she protected your dignity. But now the world sees you. He stepped back. Silence. Then, Chief Adewale rose from the front row. No microphone needed. He pointed at Sandra and Namdi. Shame on you, he said. Your brother left you a daughter, and you tried to turn her into a beggar. And now, when she finds peace, you try to destroy her again. His voice thundered. Wickedness wears many faces. But eventually the mask slips. Reporters clapped. Cameras flashed. Sandra's face turned white. Namdi, usually so loud, looked like a man deflated. Empty. Hollow. Reporters rushed them. Where's Nadia's original will? Are you claiming money she never received? Do you regret how you treated her? Sandra tried to flee. Namdi followed. But the cameras chased them out of the mansion and down the marble steps, catching every breath of their shame. Inside, Nadia stood frozen. Her legs shook, but Jerry turned to her, took her face in his hands, and whispered, It's over. Her tears came fast, but they weren't from pain. They were from release. I'm free, she asked like she didn't believe it. You're free, he said. No more padlocks. No more dust. No more begging. They held each other as the crowd outside faded. But the story didn't end with headlines. 7 years later, a black SUV turned onto the street of her childhood. Nadia sat in the back seat, staring out the window. The mango tree was still there, its branches older now. But the house was gone, sold years ago. Repainted. Loud colors. Loud gates. Nothing like memory. She stepped out. Jerry held her hand. The new owner smiled kindly. He knew nothing of her story. Jerry made an offer. 50 million naira. The man blinked and said yes. By the end of the week, the bulldozers came. The old bricks fell. Not with regret, but with purpose. Nadia stood in a hard hat, watching the walls come down. No mourning, just memory. Then the land was reborn. Chalk lines. Concrete. Steel. Windows. A courtyard open to the sky. A small clinic. A library. A coding lab. And a sign at the front gate. The Emeka and Margaret Foundation. Education. Health. Family. For orphans and widows. At the launch event, children sang in neat uniforms. Nurses offered free checkups. Widows received care packages. Volunteers set up tablets in the lab. Nadia held the ribbon-cutting scissors in shaking hands. This is for them, she said, so that no child feels alone, so that no widow sleeps in fear. The crowd applauded, but at the gate, 2 figures stood. Older now, diminished. Annie Sandra, Uncle Namdi. They walked forward slowly, their wrappers plain, their faces lowered. Nadia, Sandra said, kneeling. We were wrong. We were cruel. Forgive us. Namdi bowed. We let envy blind us. Please forgive. Reporters held their breath. Nadia stood quiet. Her heart pulled in two. Then she remembered her mother's words. Bitterness is a poison. Forgiveness is a door. I forgive you, she said. Sandra wept. Namdi's forehead touched the ground. But, Nadia added, her voice firm, forgiveness does not open old doors. We will not go back. You will not control me. You will not hurt me again. I forgive so I can heal. But we are done. Applause broke. Some cried. Some clapped with joy. And somewhere above, maybe Margaret and Emeka were smiling. Nadia stared. He had prepared for war. But as she held the file in her trembling hands, she said one thing, barely above a whisper. They won't stop. Jerry's jaw tightened. Then let them come, he said. The sun leaned low over Lagos, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the road as the black car rolled into a familiar street. It was the same street where everything had ended, and perhaps where everything had begun. Nadia sat in the back seat, her eyes locked on the road that had once been home and hell. Her fingers gently clasped the small hand beside her. 6-year-old Emma, her son, leaned forward, eyes wide. "Mommy," he said, pointing eagerly, "is it the mango tree?" She smiled softly. "Yes, love, that's the one." The tree stood crooked now, older, its leaves fewer. But it was still there, a green ghost of childhood and memory. Her father had planted it when she was 5. She used to sit under it with his old laptop, dreaming of building apps for children who had no light, no teacher, no classroom. Back when dreams were allowed. Jerry sat beside her, quiet as always. One arm stretched along the seat, the other resting across his lap. He hadn't spoken much since they left the mansion. He didn't need to. He knew what this visit meant. For Nadia, this was not a ceremony. It was a reckoning. The SUV slowed to a stop. Nadia stepped out first. The air smelled different. Cleaner, somehow. Or maybe she had just changed. She looked around. The road still had its cracks. Some of the old neighbors' houses were still standing, painted over in cheap pastel colors. The mango tree's roots had begun to lift the pavement at the edge of the property. But the house she'd grown up in? Gone. Replaced now by something else. A building of soft white walls and clean glass. Wide doors. A small courtyard with benches shaded by palms. Neat garden beds where community nurses were tending herbs. A hand-painted sign in front read, "The Emeka and Margaret Foundation, a place of light, learning, and healing." Nadia's throat tightened. She had spent years rebuilding her life. But this was where healing became legacy. She walked forward slowly, Emma holding her hand. Inside, children's voices echoed down a tiled hallway. A woman in a pink uniform handed out care kits to elderly widows seated under a canopy. A few volunteers were setting up tablets in the computer lab. In the clinic room, a young nurse checked an old man's blood pressure while a soft gospel tune played from a speaker nearby. Nadia moved quietly through it all, her eyes soaking in each detail. The welcome desk, the laughter, the light streaming through windows that hadn't existed before. She reached the central corridor and paused. Jerry caught up with her, his expression warm but unreadable. He didn't say a word, just rested a hand lightly on the small of her back. "Come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're waiting." They turned down a quieter path behind the building. The courtyard gave way to a small, walled garden with a tree planted right in the center. A young tree, still growing. Around it, flowers bloomed. And beneath it, 2 headstones rested under a canopy of peace. Emeka Okafor, beloved father. A man of vision. Margaret Okafor, loving mother. A woman of light. There was no marble fence. No locked gate. The graves were part of the space, connected to the building, not shut away from it. Not hidden, because this was the house they had built in spirit, even if not in brick. Nadia knelt down. Emma followed suit and dropped a small hibiscus flower on the soil. "Grandpa and Grandma," he said softly, "Mommy made you a school and a hospital, and a coding place, too." Nadia smiled through tears. She reached in her bag and placed a bouquet of white lilies between the stones. Then she placed her palm on the ground. Her fingers shook. "Mama, Papa," she whispered, "I kept the dream." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I studied. I built the apps. I teach children you would have loved. And I married a man who kept every promise." She turned to look at Jerry. His eyes were on her, steady, full of the kind of pride that needed no words. Then Jerry knelt beside her. He rested one hand on the soil and said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me with her. I will protect her and your grandson as long as I live." The wind moved through the leaves of the young tree. Not a gust, just a soft breath. Peace settled over the garden. They stayed there for a long time. Later that day, Nadia gave a small speech in the main hall. A few reporters had been invited. Community leaders, volunteers, teachers, mothers and daughters and sons who now walked into a building that had risen from Nadia's past pain. This she said into the microphone, is for them. For every child who has felt alone. For every widow who has slept in fear. For every dream that once seemed too far. Her voice trembled. She didn't try to hide it. I was once called a curse. I was once locked out of my home. But now, we've built a home that cannot be locked. Applause rippled through the room. She stepped off stage. And there, standing at the entrance, as if time had stumbled, were two familiar faces. Older, grayer, smaller. Annie Sandra, Uncle Namdi. Their clothes were faded, their eyes downcast. No slipper in hand now. No fire. Just shame. They walked forward slowly as the crowd parted. Then, before the cameras, before the children, before the very building that stood as proof of what they once tried to destroy, they knelt. Nadia, Annie Sanders said. Her voice cracked. We were wrong. Uncle Namdi bowed, so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. We let envy blind us, he said. We chased you away from your father's house. We mocked you, hurt you, and now we see what we did. The entire room fell silent. Reporters froze. The children stared wide-eyed. Nadia looked down at them. She saw the people who had spat on her in the street, who had laughed when she begged, who had watched her suffer. And then she remembered her mother's voice, clear as the morning breeze under that old mango tree. Bitterness is a poison. Forgiveness is a door. I forgive you, she said. Sandra wept. Namdi's shoulders shook. But, Nadia added, her voice now steady and sharp, forgiveness does not open old doors. I will not go back to that life. You will not control me. You will not hurt me again. Her words rang clear. So I forgive, not for you, but for me, for them, for peace. A beat of silence. Then the applause came. Soft at first, then louder. Some clapped, some cried, some simply stood in awe. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the foundation in golden hues, Nadia, Jerry, and Emma walked the path back to the graveyard once more. They sat on the stone bench nearby, watching the sunset. Mama, Nadia whispered, looking at the headstone. I hope you see this. I hope you see. I'm not surviving anymore. I'm shining. Jerry reached for her hand. You always were, he said. You just needed space to rise. She looked at Emma. Her son was now playing with two other children on the lawn, showing them how to use one of the donated tablets. His laughter filled the space like music. Legacy, she said softly. That's what this is. The leaves rustled in the wind, and the ghosts of pain faded, replaced by something warmer. Not triumph, but peace. The night air at Banana Island was unusually still. No cars, no wind, just the soft hum of distant waves and the occasional hush of palm trees shifting against one another like tired dancers. Nadia stood alone on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl. Below her, the estate glowed, the driveway lined with lights, the fountain whispering into the silence. In the sky, stars blinked faintly over Lagos, like scattered memories refusing to fade. Behind her, Jerry was already asleep. Emma had curled into a ball beside him after a long day of questions, laughter, and too many sweets from the nurses at the foundation. They had come home tired but happy. But Nadia couldn't sleep. Not yet. She looked down at the city, her city, the one that had once buried her under names, orphan, shame, curse. The city that had closed its gates, then opened its arms. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was carrying a wound. She was carrying a world. The foundation had taken off like a blessing in motion. More volunteers had arrived in the last week alone than she could name. Donors, teachers, women who had heard her story and showed up with baskets of food and hearts open to serve. Government officers had even hinted at replicating the model in other cities. Nadia wasn't just a symbol anymore. She was a builder, and builders, real ones, worked with what others called rubble. She turned and went inside. Jerry stirred slightly as she slipped into bed. His hand reached out even in his sleep, finding her instinctively. Always that same protective touch, gentle but firm. The same hand that had lifted her out of the dust outside her father's house years ago. Nadia lay beside him and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she told herself, tomorrow I'll rest. But tomorrow had other plans. The phone call came just after dawn. one of the Foundation's security guards. Breathless. "Madam," he said, "there's someone at the gate." Nadia blinked, still groggy. "What do they want?" She says she used to live here, before the house was torn down." Nadia sat up. It was a woman. Elderly. Gray scarf. Worn slippers. Standing outside the gate with a walking stick and a look that didn't belong to this century. Nadia came out in a sweatshirt and scarf, face bare. The guard opened the small pedestrian door. The woman looked up. Her eyes were watery, but sharp. You are Margaret's daughter?" "Yes," Nadia said, confused. "Did you know her?" The woman nodded. "We grew up together. She gave me this," she said, pulling out a tiny crocheted handkerchief from her bag. "Said it was for when the world forgets your name." Nadia's eyes stung. "I heard what you built," the woman continued. "I had to come, just to see it, just to say thank you." Nadia stepped forward and took her hand. "Come in." She gave the woman tea, showed her the garden. "Let her sit by the tree." The old woman didn't speak much after that. She just smiled. But before she left, she pressed something into Nadia's hand. A small, faded photo. Nadia unfolded it carefully. It was of her mother, young, laughing, standing beside a girl in overalls. The same girl who had just finished her tea. On the back, scribbled in faded ink. "To the girl who makes even weeds feel like roses." That night, Nadia added the photo to the display in her private office at the Foundation. A wall of faces. Her parents, Jerry and Emma. The first graduating class from the coding lab. The widows who helped lay the first stone. One face at a time, the wall grew into a portrait of resilience. And in the center, a blank space. Emma wandered in. "Mommy," he said, pointing at the empty square. "Who goes there?" She looked at it for a long time, then said, "That's for whoever needs to believe their story isn't over." He tilted his head. "That could be anyone." "Yes," she smiled. "Exactly." In the weeks that followed, Nadia and Jerry launched a new initiative, scholarships for young girls in rural communities. They named it the Slipper Fund, in quiet irony, a nod to a time when shame came in the shape of a raised rubber shoe. At the launch, Nadia gave a short speech. No podium, no printed script, just her and the crowd. "I was beaten with a slipper for loving the wrong man," she said simply. "But that man built me a home. And now, that slipper is paying school fees." Laughter, applause, some tears, and a realization. This wasn't just a redemption story. It was a revolution. On the 1-year anniversary of the Foundation, Nadia returned alone to the old road where her journey had bent forever. Not to cry, not to remember pain, but to plant something. She walked behind the building, past the grave markers, into a quiet corner. There, she dug into the soil and placed a mango seed, taken from the fruit of the tree her father had planted decades ago. Not for memory, but for future shade. She stood up, brushed the dirt from her palms, and looked around. She was no longer standing outside a locked gate, no longer waiting for permission. She was home. That evening, she stood on a balcony once more. Jerry joined her, Emma curled in his arms. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Any of it?" She leaned her head against his shoulder. "No," she whispered. "Even the worst parts made the best ones possible." He kissed her temple. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." They watched the city in silence. A city that had tried to erase her, but failed, because Nadia hadn't just survived. She had rewritten the ending. And somewhere, far from Banana Island, in a quiet street still buzzing with gossip, an old woman turned off her TV and wiped her eyes. "She did it," she said. "She did what none of us could." She turned to her husband, who nodded slowly. She turned shame into light.